Today's Wednesday, November 28th, 2018. Welcome to the Survivor Fans Podcast. I'm Stacy. I'll be your host for this week's recap for David versus Goliath, episode 10, a double episode, so it's kind of like 10 and 11. That's why I like to use week. Yeah, week 10. This episode's titled Tribal Lines Are Blurred. That's a theme that actually started back in week 9 in Tribal Council there. Alec talked about the blurring of the lines, and then Gabby repeated it, and Probst made reference to it at the end of Tribal Council. We hear Alison say that title in the first episode, and then we get it again from Mike in the second episode. But then Probst is also saying it at the end of each of those episodes too. So I'm not sure who to give the credit to there. We'll give it to all three. Alison, Mike, and Probst are credited with the title this week. So you just got me again for this recap. I mentioned in the listener feedback show on Saturday, Joanne's brother passed away. We got a call last Friday, and then I was taking her to the airport 3 a.m. on Saturday morning. You'll have me for the listener feedback show on Saturday, and then she'll be back more than likely for the next recap show next week. Just me for now for this amazing double episode. And we keep talking about how this season is really stacking up to be potentially great. What are some of the key elements of a top 10 season? You got a great cast, you have epic blindsides, you have high-level gameplay, and you have grueling endurance challenges. We've had plenty of that, and we got more in this double episode. A lot of times with the double episode, and Joanne and I were talking about this on the phone yesterday, in the past, for a lot of these, it's more like, hey, let's get through these two. So it's nice that you get two out that maybe aren't so critical to the story to begin with. But there's a lot going on, I think, in these two episodes, and I didn't feel like it was, hey, it's good to have a double just to get a couple more people out of the game. It was exciting from beginning to end. So let's go to the beginning. Previously on Survivor, Probst tells us that Kara, Alison, and Alec considered the David alliance, but trust was just an issue they couldn't overcome, and they remained segregated. At Tribal Council, the power shifted. Alec and Kara, to save face, threw some votes towards Angelina. So that's potentially clearing up some questions we had from last time, right? So this is them making their own decision to vote that way. Dan played a hidden immunity idol, but Carl blocked it. There's only 10 left because Dan's gone. Okay, so it's night 25. We're back at the camp, and the Davids are celebrating. 2 advantages played right, and that is spectacular. And so you got some, again, more in terms of this season's resume. Let's put it in those terms, right? Like you're building a story for Final Tribal Council. You get events that don't normally happen, which is advantages like steal a vote playing out so that it works, and then the nullifier being played correctly right out of the gate with no one having ever seen it before. And Carl tells us that he is thrilled to have his foot on the Goliath's throats at this point, and he's happy to be moving forward with their current plan. Angelina at this point is trying to suss out exactly what was going on, so she goes and questions her alliance and confirms that yes, they did indeed turn on her. So she makes a pitch to Christian. She tells Christian that she's not scorned, but she then goes on to basically provide the very definition for that, and that she's out for revenge against her alliance since they turned and voted for her, even though Dan was the one that went out. Okay, so it's day 26. Davie and Nick are up early. Why? Because they know when an idol gets played, another one gets put out in its place. So they're up early and searching. It's not the whole David tribe this time. Just Davie and Nick are the most industrious up before daylight and out and looking. And Davie's got a plan. He tells us that there's a certain portion of the island that nothing's appeared in yet, so that's where they're going to focus their search. Nick ends up finding a clue. It's moving more and closer and closer to the time when he tells us that everyone will be getting up, including the Goliaths. So he's able to find that clue. It's not the actual immunity idol, but the clue tells him that if he heads out tonight and goes way far down the beach there on the island, that he'll eventually find a light, and there at the light we expect that he'll get a hidden immunity idol. It was interesting to note here during when Nick was talking about that, it looked like he had John's jacket on. Anybody else notice that at that point? So he just had John's jacket. He didn't even have a shirt on. So I guess he and Davie are sharing John's jacket. Nick tells us he's ready to pull an all-nighter if that's what it takes to find that immunity idol when he is required to sneak off and go looking for it later tonight. Okay, moving on to the reward challenge. They get divided up into two teams. On the orange team, you've got Alison, Gabby, Christian, Mike, and Alec. And on the purple team, you've got Carl, Davie, Angelina, Nick, and Kara. So they're going to have to race over a rope bridge, and Probst tells us this is a new challenge for Survivor that they hadn't done before. So they have to place their feet on a rope that's strung across two platforms, and then the only thing that they can stabilize themselves with is every few feet there's a length of rope hanging down from above them. So yeah, it's really precarious. And once they get across that, they've got rungs, like there's a ladder configuration, but the rungs and the ladder are missing, so they have to pick up these basically the sticks for the rungs of the ladder, and they've got to toss them and have them land perfectly on the rungs. It can't be crooked, it's got to be level, and so they got to land 3 of those to win the reward. And the reward is a Survivor picnic. Probst tells us there are wraps and salads and wine and all kinds of good stuff there. Nick and Alec are out first, and Alec, as expected, makes quick work of the rope challenge and scoots across there. Then we get Kara and Alison, and Alison's got some really serious shaky legs, so she ends up, she struggled with that one mightily, but she does eventually end up making it across, and Kara made short work of it too. Okay, and then Gabby and Carl come across, and Davie makes short work of it and finishes up. Mike makes it. I was concerned. I was wondering how he was going to do. And then Christian did really good making up time to come across. So the purple does start with a big lead at the rungs there, the purple team. And Nick gets one and Alec gets one, and they're tied 1-1 in the beginning. And then Davie gets another, and then Alec wins it. Just boom, boom, and it's over. So Christian, Alison, Gabby, Mike, and Alec are all headed to a picnic. Carl tells us in a confessional after the reward challenge is over that Alec stole my food reward. Therefore, he needs to go. Okay, come back from commercial. We're still there, day 26, headed to the picnic. Alec tells us in his confessional that I was the star, and I'm going to capitalize on this. So he puts his best flirt face on and goes after Christian and Gabby. He tells us he's flirting with both of them, trying to court them, hoping that he can win some affinity from them and not get voted out in this next round. Gabby tells us that the Davids have the power now, and she's happy that she has more options. And as a bonus, they get letters from home. Alec finds them in the bottom of the picnic basket there. And time for the waterworks. Serious tears ensue as everyone gets sort of blindsided with letters from home and references from their loved ones. Christian tells us that he's been able to accomplish all 3 of the goals his dad set out for him and prove that he's a force in the game. And he's proud of himself for that. And that I guess the letter from his dad helped him recognize that and the progress that he's made. Back at camp, Carl is making rice, and Nick's out on the raft, I think with Kara, and I don't remember who else was there, maybe Angelina. He was out fishing, but he was talking about how hungry he was and that he wasn't having much luck fishing. Carl's feeling pretty low after losing that reward challenge, and he's telling us how much not being able to get the food hurts, and he and Angelina haven't been on a food reward yet. So it's definitely humbling him to deal with the pain there. But he also tells us that kind of pain makes him stronger, so he's going to draw on that. And Carl, he's very confident. He's overconfident at this point. So we see the first of the big blunders here. And right in front of Kara, he says, he asks her, straightforward, does Alec have an idol? And he's just right in front of everyone. And that sets Kara off. She says that he's overconfident, and it's really showing. And he's really set on getting Alec out, and he makes that clear. And Kara does share that with Alec when he gets back from the reward challenge, that you're next. And Alec admits, that's scary. Carl's coming after me now. And then he proceeds to throw up his reward, because we heard earlier at the picnic that he had eaten, I think it was 6 wraps. So he definitely overindulged, as a lot of people would probably be tempted to do in that kind of scenario. And Alison's not too far behind, so she's having a hard time with the food too. And you even hear Nick comment at one point, I think when Alec was throwing up, that's just wasted nutrition. So he wasn't cutting him any slack, even though you could tell Alec was feeling miserable. All right, tonight 26, Nick tells us that it's fun to be sneaky. He's enjoying being mischievous, and Davie's covering for him. And I'm not so sure how much cover he needed. Alison wasn't really paying attention as she got up to go throw up again. But yeah, Nick sneaks down the beach. He eventually finds the light. Lo and behold, it is indeed a hidden immunity idol. He didn't seem to need to do anything extra to find it. He just had to make his way there. He tells us eventually they'll wake up and come for me, but right now he's playing hard, and he's just ecstatic that he's got a 1 in 10 shot at $1 million. So, and that just sort of completes a set of those, because you got Christian saying essentially the same thing, Alex saying that too, and now Nick talking about how hard they're playing for that $1 million, and they've all got their eye on the prize. Day 27, time for the immunity challenge. You're going to have to balance on a narrow perch. It looks like it's just enough for I don't know, like maybe an inch, 2 inches of your heel. And then you got to reach up behind you and keep your hands on the handle. So you got to keep your feet on this little small sliver of a perch. And you got to keep both hands on the handles that are up behind you and behind your head. It just looks like an incredibly uncomfortable position to be in. Classic survivor endurance challenge. There's a lot of pain involved, and it comes down to who wants it worse and who can manage that pain and find their way through it. And this is exactly what you need to have one of those unbelievable top 10 for a new season to come into that kind of realm like this one seems to be tracking for. You need an endurance challenge like this, and you need an exciting win too. So Probst adds the special twist that I always love to see for these, which is, hey, if you're secure, I've got some food over here that you can nosh on, instead of putting yourself through this torture of this endurance challenge. And it's great for highlighting where people's heads are, and that's the kind of thing that can end up hurting you in the end for sure. But you got Carl, who hasn't been on a reward, Angelina, who hasn't been had a food reward. It's going to be super tempting for them. And the big question as they go to commercial is, what will Carl do? Is he going to give in there? And we come back and we find out, sure enough, Angelina, Carl, and surprisingly Nick have opted to feast on this gigantic bowl of nachos. And there's also beer and some tea or something, some soft drinks that are available to them. And it was quite a large bowl of nachos. So, like I said, it only looked like you could probably get just the side of your foot on it or the back of your heel on that perch. And Probst tells us that your hands and feet must always remain in contact with it. So it's really hard to make adjustments. And meanwhile, Carl's enjoying his beer as he belches out loud for everyone to hear. We see Mike's feet start shaking, and just after 11 minutes in, and boom, he's out, and Davie shortly behind him. Carl and Angelina are enjoying their nachos, but they're also busily planning Alec's future, and that expecting him not to win this and then being able to vote him out. So we tick off 1 hour, and Carl tells us that Alec is hurting, but he's sure his girl Kara is solid, at which point Kara promptly steps off and away from the challenge. So they're 1 hour and 35 minutes in. Probst tells us there's no breeze, there's no relief. Mike and Nick have actually crawled under the bench over there where they were sitting and eating nachos to find a little bit of shade. And then Alison goes out, and Alec tells us that he's staying in till he wins. And it's down to Alec and Gabby and Christian at this point. Gabby and Christian engage in some odd lecture to Probst, correcting him about his percentages of winning announcement and significant digits. I don't know, I had a flashback to math class many, many years ago. Alec keeps saying that he's going to win. They're 2 hours in, and Gabby tells us it's so hard, but this is the one that I can win. And then Probst turns to Alec and asks him where he's at, and Alec tells us, I'll win. Carl's trying to give some encouragement, tells Gabby that she's strong. Alec's saying, you'll let go, you'll let go. Gabby cries and steps down, and Alison comes in to comfort the crying, crumpled Gabby, who basically collapsed there in front of her perch. So we're in a showdown. It's Christian versus Alec. Christian's telling Alec, you want it, and you're a beast. 3 hours in now. Yeah, we're into some serious Survivor Endurance Challenge at this point. Christian realizes that he's got a captive audience there in Jeff Probst and the others, and he decides to tell a story. So he starts relaying a experiment that he worked on measuring plant root growth. And minutes start ticking by as he continues to lecture. 3 hours and 50 minutes in, you can see Alec is struggling, but Christian's going strong. He's on to 20 questions. He's engaging Probst. 4 hours and 45 minutes in, still going, still talking. In 5 hours, Alec tells us that he's feeling like he's passed out. He tries to make a plea. He turns to Christian and says, you're safe, I'm not. And Christian's ready with a response. And he lays it out plain for Alec. Look, he tells him, I might never get this opportunity again. I've got to go for it. And eventually at 5.5 hours, Probst tells us, a little over 5.5 hours, we get the conclusion is Alec drops off the perch. Christian just won individual immunity against Alec. How is that? That's amazing. All right, day 27, and Christian is immune. He tells us he's going to be immune at tomorrow night's Tribal Council. So usually the Tribal Council is the night of the challenge, but in this case, it's going to be on night 28, and Christian's quick to pick up on that, and he tells us, I won, but there's a full day of planning ahead that can happen, and a lot can change. But as far as he's concerned, Alec is the target at this point. Okay, it's the next day, day 28, and Alec is talking, and he says that immunity was like the most frustrating thing that he's had to deal with, and he knows he was a physical threat, and and he's like the most significant physical threat left in the game, and it's really got him going. He's crying, he's breaking down. He tells us, though, he didn't come here to be a unanimous vote out. Remember that. Carl tells us, yeah, Alec's going. There's no need to sugarcoat it. This vote is simple. And Gabby notices that Carl's spending a lot of time talking to Kara, and she's bum puzzled by that. Why is he spending so much time talking to Kara? And Gabby also shares that she calls Carl the Godfather, something we had heard from Next Time on Survivor. And Gabby's really upset about that. She questions Carl once he's done talking to Kara. It's why would you tell her? What's going on? How come I'm walking in and I'm not hearing all these details that you're sharing more with Kara than you're actually telling me? It really sets Gabby off, and that's where that disagreement with Carl happened, where we see Carl tell her that she's being too emotional from the Next Time on Survivor last week. And Christian feels the need to translate on Gabby's behalf and explain what it was that she was trying to convey before he ends up telling Gabby she's too emotional. And Christian tells us that it's his job to make sure that Gabby's happy. I guess he's her handler at this point. Yeah, and Gabby and Christian are talking, and Gabby shares how upset she is by all that and her interactions with Carl as she's commiserating with Christian. Alex talking to Alison, and he says they're bigger threats. They're just using my physicality as an excuse to come after me. Carl is the one who got Dan out. He's the one who's acting cocky. He needs to go. And Alec and Mike and Alison are talking, and they agree that they need to focus on Carl. And Kara comes up, and she says, yeah, why can't we get Carl out? So now we're going to make it interesting. Is it going to be Alec? Is it going to be Carl? So we've got two targets as we're headed to Tribal Council. And Alec makes a pitch to Christian. And Christian this is a great example of what I think you need to do in these situations, regardless of what you're really going to do. You tell that person what they need to hear, and Christian agrees with Alec and said, yep, you're my meat shield, and it's good to keep threats around. I don't think we see him make a specific commitment to Alec, but he did tell him, he gave him hope. Gabby and Christian are talking, and Gabby says, it's our choice. We just need to make sure that we swing the pendulum together in the direction that we want. And Christian tells us in a confessional right before they head off to Tribal Council that the game is about to get very dynamic very quickly. I would argue that it's been dynamic for quite a while, but I appreciate him keeping that in mind as they're headed forward. So it's night 28. We've got the horns of battle blowing as we come into Tribal Council. It's like the Uruk-hai are flooding out of Mordor and Isengard. I love that horn. I know I've heard it before as they were headed into Tribal Council in other seasons, but for some reason I really enjoy that. Okay, the jury comes in, Elizabeth, John, and Dan, and Dan's got his pinch face. He's not happy. All right, Probst describes the nearly 6 hours of immunity challenge and how Christian had him as a captive audience. It's basically catching the jury up on what happened and why Christian's got that immunity necklace on. Alec tells us that he was hurting and he felt vulnerable and got dizzy, and that's why he had to step down and forfeit the immunity challenge. Nick tells us that in response to Probst's question about sitting out for the nachos and the impact on his game, that he thinks the decision to chow down on the nachos looked pretty good, and there was a lot of people wishing they had made that choice as the challenge stretched on for over 5 hours. So I kind of like that response, but Alec wasn't letting that slide. He basically says that, folks are judged by their choices. You opt out of a challenge, that's something that can come back to bite you. And Carl responds in his defense, because he chose to eat too, that was his chance to eat, and he hadn't had a food reward, so be it. And Kara even turns on the attack against Carl at that point, and she's saying, you ate, that's the bottom line. And Christian makes some comment about calculated risks and offers some explanation in that regard in the context of the game, and they cut to Dan over in the jury saying that he lost me. This is where I'm not sure, I can't say with utmost certainty, but I think this is where we might see evidence of Dan being willing. Like I said last time that I thought he was a potential bitter juror. I could see him turning on Christian, and his need to tell John that is, and them highlighting it makes me think that, that's just something that Dan, he's going to go on the attack against Christian. That whole brochacho thing's not going to stand the test of time if Dan gets that opportunity. Angelina talks about the time for risks, and Alison says in response that she doesn't much value Angelina's perspective on things. So that was pretty cold. I mean, that's the spirit of what she said. She didn't say those exact words, but yeah, she's not a big Angelina fan for sure. Alec tells us that new alliances have been formed, but they haven't been tested. And Gabby says, that's right, it's time to talk. We've had there's either talk or do, really, is what she's saying. Now's the time for action. We get the title from Alison right here, in addition to the Probst references, that tribal lines are blurred. Alec talks about his value as a meat shield for someone else in the game, and Christian highlights the fact that, yes, indeed, when questioned by Probst, that every strength can become a weakness too. Part of the dichotomy of the game. Probst comes after Carl for eating nachos, and Carl's response is, well, yeah, it potentially could be $1 million mistake, but I feel good with my decision, which, given your decision, sticking by it, I guess, like that wholeheartedly is certainly a way to go at that point. Okay, so we can tell the vote's gonna come down between Alec and Carl. We see Christian, when he's voting, say, this vote is for the benefit of my game and no one else's. So it's interesting in contrast to the discussion earlier with Gabby about them swinging together as a pendulum. So we get 1 vote for Alec, 1 vote for Carl, and then 5 more votes for Alec, and Alec is gone. He gets 6 votes. He's out. That's enough. And he seemed to handle it like a champ. No worries. Tells Probst, snuff it, brother, when it's time to snuff his torch out, and gives a little hang loose, and he's out of there. And Probst hits us again with the lines are clearly blurred, and the lanes are wide open with opportunity after that. Okay, so we go back to camp, night 28. Davie tells the others that I'm glad you realized what you needed to do with that vote. And we hear Nick say that really made it for him. Now the Davids are in control. They have got a numbers majority. There's 5 of them, and there's 4 of the Goliaths. Alison's crying. She's playing. She's pulled a play out of Gabby's playbook, and she's crying and gets Christian to comfort her and tells Christian, she makes her, let's join brains pitch here. Oh, so that was, I guess if you can't beat them, join them. Is that what Alison's doing? She's offering herself as an alternative, tears and all, to Christian, and certainly gets some of Christian's time, and looks like some of his sympathy there. Alison tells us it's just like with her patients. Sometimes you can't save them if they're too critical, and she had to let go of Alec, and she knows that she's the next biggest threat. And she also knows that she's talked about making moves, but hasn't done anything. Like Gabby said, it's time to do something and quit talking about it, right? And Alison realizes that she was pointing that at her to some degree. And she's lamenting her choices at this point and wondering if she missed out on an opportunity. Okay, day 29, it's our second reward challenge here in the double episodes. Probst tells us we'll have 2 teams of 4. You'll have to climb up this ladder. It's got some serious height on it, and then leap off into the ocean. And then someone's going to have to dive down and retrieve 2 strings of buoys. And then they're going to carry those 5 of, I don't remember how many there are in total, but let's say there's like 20 buoys or something like that. 5 of them are marked, and you got to take those 5 and you got to jump and throw them into a basket, kind of like a basketball hoop, but it's closed. So you got to leap off into the water with the ball and try to get it into the basket as you fall down into the water. Probst tells us that the reward is a speedboat tour, and it comes with chicken and tater salad and cheesecake, and it's a schoolyard pick, and someone's not going to be chosen, and therefore they won't be eligible for the reward. It turns out it's Christian, so no opportunity for speedboats and fried chicken for him. So you've got Kara, Carl, Davie, and Mike versus Angelina, Gabby, Alison, and Nick. Mike actually does a great job. He gets up and jumps off that high ladder. Yeah, gets out there first. Does really good. Now, and everybody goes through and they're able to jump off of there, and they manage it without losing too much time. Now both teams have to dive down and pull out the 2 lines of the buoys, and Kara and Alison just do a fantastic job going down to get it. We see Angelina pulling them out, so really good job with that. And then it's time to get those buoys in the baskets, and we see Nick gets one, and then Carl gets one. Davie slams one in with authority, and then gets another and another. So Davie gets another one, and then Carl gets the 4th one, and then Davie gets the 5th one for the win. So Davie, Carl, Kara, and Mike end up with reward, and Carl is thrilled that he's finally going to get a food reward. You can tell that he's been talking about it. It's been talked about a lot because Probst even mentions it. Angelina, Probst tells us, still is getting nothing. Kara tells us that this is a crucial reward. It's her opportunity to reconnect with Carl and Davie, and it's what she hopes will lead her further into the game. Okay, they're off on the reward. Carl's yelling, "Go faster," and he's chugging beers as they're headed out on the boat before the food even starts. Mike tells us that he's a free agent on this reward and he's having a good time, but he also acknowledges it's time for him to suck it up and try to find a way further in the game. Kara's working to get Carl to trust her, and Carl tells her right out, Alison goes next. So the beer's already working its magic on Carl, and his inhibitions and reservations are gone, so he's freely announcing what his strategy is, and Kara's happy to hear it. She says, thanks for sharing, and she's happy to pretend to go along with that. Davie and Carl end up drunk and before they get to where the food is, and they're carrying a cooler full of more beer off with them as they head to the food. Davie tells us that he is so ecstatic that he was able to dunk that ball into the basket, and that his friends aren't going to be able to take his black card away from him anymore. He's done something athletic now. Carl tells us there's a bunch of shady people back there at the beach. He's happy to be celebrating with this group of good folks, and Mike tells him, yep, I'm here to help you with your vote. Kara tells us that Carl just keeps sharing more, and that she knows she's a pawn, but he's drunk on power and beer, and this is a good opportunity for her to collect intelligence. Back at camp there on day 29, Christian and Gabby are talking about having a solid 5, but Carl getting all the credit, and then Gabby's really starting to make her move here. And that's what she announces to Christian. She says she's ready to make a significant move in the game, and she's gathering information to act on it right now. Gabby's talking to Alison and shares with her that she is ready to blindside Carl. You, me, and Christian, we can set it up and make this happen. Alison says in her confessional, that is indeed music to my ears, and the timing feels right. Okay, they welcome back the reward winners to the beach, and Carl is he's really drunk and happy to share when he's back. He tells us his game is in great shape. We just got to take it one at a time and get the work done. Carl's holding court from the hammock and talking to Davie and Angelina and Nick, and tells them, look, let's have no scrambling. This is an easy vote. And Angelina tells us that she has replaced Gabby in Carl's alliance. So Abby gets her Angelina gets her marching orders from Carl, and she's happy to follow along. Carl talks to Mike and says, hey, Alison's got to go. Mike tells us, yep, Carl's a godfather. And as far as Mike's concerned, he is happy, he tells us, to swim away from Alison at this point. Christian's called over, or beckoned, as he says, by Carl, and Carl tells him that they're taking out Alison, and Christian, correctly, as before, tells him exactly what he needs to hear. I'm cool, sounds like a plan, he's good to go. This is where they hatch their plan to hide from Gabby, because they know Gabby's got a relationship with Alison, so Carl tells Christian to tell Gabby it's Angelina, and Christian tells us that Carl must go in response to that. So Mike's talking to Christian and makes his pitch for Carl to go. Mike agrees, yep, Carl is slightly menacing. There's something slightly menacing about him. And Mike's thrilled, because Mike's basically been put in the position of being a swing vote at this point, and that works for him. He tells us he's got to choose between Alison as Wonder Woman or Carl as the Godfather, and he's trying to decide which is best for Mike. All right, day 30, it's a sunrise. Davie notices that Gabby and Christian are talking down at the beach. Cut to Christian and Gabby, and Gabby's asking Christian, do people think I'm stupid? Because Christian's laying out the plan to hide from her that Alison's going, and just really got Gabby set off. And Gabby correctly points out, if you don't tell me who we're really voting for, we're not really in an alliance. They cut over at this point to Angelina and Kara, who are recognizing that they're actually in a crisis mode. It turns out they're very, very low on rice, and they hatch a plan to start a negotiation with Jeff. Angelina tells us that she loves negotiations. They're so fun to her, and she's actually taken 2 classes on negotiations at Yale. So that sets it up. It better be pretty impressive when she kicks off this negotiation to get more rice. Mike tells us that she's basically ready to sell all their stuff to get the rice. He's not impressed with her negotiation skills. And he adds that she's completely aggravating at every step of the way as she goes through this. So I'm still of the mind that there's no way Angelina can win. Her social game is like a 0. Because I think she keeps coming across to everyone this way, and this is her amped up negotiation plan that she's so ecstatic to hatch, and she's describing it, which ends up boring everyone. She doesn't have the situational awareness to recognize what kind of impact she's having on others, and Mike's just sort of reinforcing that and noting how aggravating it is having to listen to her. Okay, we're at the immunity challenge. They've got to race over an obstacle and then collect some puzzle pieces and then do the one of those drunk spinner challenges where you got to spin around in place so that it makes you dizzy to get more puzzle pieces off to get the second set. And then you'll collect a third. After you're all dizzy, you got to go over a zigzag beam that you got to balance on to get your third set of puzzle pieces. And then once you get there, you got to solve a word puzzle. It's 11 letters and 13. The word's 11 letters, but you've got 13 actual letters to choose from. At which point, after explaining the challenge, Angelina launches in to her incredible negotiation and explains what's going on with their rice situation and how she wants to, they're down to 10 shells worth, and she actually brings the shell as a visual prop to demonstrate how little they have. And she makes her starting offer, and she just seems to do a horrible job. Just for someone who's so gung-ho about doing negotiations and seems to think they're very good at it after having 2 classes at Yale, she gives a great demonstration of how not to negotiate. Probst didn't have any of it. Just tells her flat out that's a horrible lowball pitch, and Angelina spends too much time talking and giving away everything. She's basically a big blabber at this point. And Probst says, look, here you go. Here's the deal. Someone could sacrifice himself. You could take yourself out of the running for immunity in this challenge, and then I'll get you the supplies that you need. And then Angelina doesn't seem to hesitate very long, and she ends up volunteering. So she has to find a spot in the grass and sit out. But she's ensured that's going to get them food, and you hear Alison say, great negotiation, but I think she was being facetious. I don't think that was congratulatory. Angelina pats herself on the back. That's a risk taken by me, and I'm building my resume as I make sure that this tribe's got food. That never works in your favor. That doesn't win you anything when you make sure someone else has food like that. And if you spin it that way, it's just not going to do you any good. But okay, that's her play. Okay, the first obstacle is it's like ladders. There's a theme, isn't it? Ladders with missing rungs. So there's no actual rungs. There's just a little where you might place a rung. There's these little knobs that you could step on to climb up, but people don't seem to have too much trouble with that. It's the spinning around and around to get to release the second set of puzzle pieces that makes them dizzy, that makes it really hard. But several people get through that and get across and start working on their word puzzle. So the whole dizzy thing didn't seem to have a huge impact on them. Carl actually thinks that he has solved it. He pulls up perceptions, and then Probst tells him that's wrong, and then Alison and Davie pivot really rapidly and start respelling out a new word, and Davie actually gets to it a couple of letters before Alison. The word turns out to be perspective, and Davie has now won individual immunity, and they all thank Angelina for getting them the food, which is the proper thing to do regardless of whether or not it's going to mean any significance for her game. Certainly you tell her that, because that's just jury management at this point, isn't it? You tell her what a great job she's done. Angelina tells us that Alison is vulnerable. She didn't win, and she's happy about that, but she's also happy that she got rice for the tribe. Okay, back at camp there on day 30, Angelina tells us that I didn't want to make a big deal about it, which is always someone's way of making a big deal about it, right? About winning the rice. Carl is talking to Christian and Angelina, and he really wants to fix some rice to celebrate. And he's looking forward to using Angelina and Mike's vote. Cut to a shark out in the water, and then Alison and Kara are talking. Alison says, I'm the target. I know it's going to be close. We need to check with Mike and see what he may want to do with this vote, see if we can get him to vote for Carl. Mike tells us that, yes, this is indeed his greatest acting role. So he talks to Alison and Kara, and then Mike tells us that, well, it's easier for me if Alison goes, but Don Vito Carl there should really go. And we get a scene where Mike's talking to Christian, and Mike's talking about how much he hates his beard and how much it was bothering him. So he goes down to wash his beard out, I guess. That was interesting. Christian realizes that Mike is indeed an actor, and he knows that there's a lot of risk involved with trusting him. He could very well be conned by Mike at this point. Gabby tells us she'll be vindicated if Carl goes, and she's been called emotional and hysterical, and she's going to basically put an end to all that if she takes Carl out. And I think right here, this is that flashback. I talked about it a little bit at the end of the listener feedback show last week, but you had that two lines from Mike, right? Carl and Davie will never mount an insurrection. Okay, they've done that. And then Mike went on to say, and no one will follow Gabby into battle. But that's essentially what's going on. This is a follow Gabby into battle moment right now. So, per Mike's anti-prediction from before. Okay, we're on to our second tribal council. It's night 30. The jury comes in. The Brochachos and Elizabeth are all throwing the hang loose there. We get one from John and Dan and from Alec. Kara tells us, yes, everyone voted for Alec last time. So sometimes it comes down to that. And that was the sacrifice that they made. And it's nothing official until you sign your name. And she's definitely saying, look, I did this. We talked about, stop talking and doing, and I did this. And Alison comments, too, about how clear her intent was also. Nick makes some analogy with scrambled eggs, and Christian's not happy with it, so he's got to modify it to describe it as, it wasn't scrambled eggs back at camp, it's more like the poached egg plan. Angelina tells us that it's jovial back at camp. They're there to play hard, but not take it personal. Yeah, you always sort of get the sense that she's saying what she thinks other people want to hear, right? So, not necessarily a bad trait, I guess, but if you get called out, busted for it, it's not going to work in your favor. Mike tells us that in response to one of Prope's questions that he used to be hesitant about voting people out, but there's so much blood on the floor that he's used to voting folks out now. Alison says that maybe it's her turn, maybe she's next. Nick talks about different eggs. The eggs analogies were a little much for me at these two episodes, or this episode rather. Carl says, well, he didn't see anything different back at camp, so it wasn't like scrambled eggs, or it wasn't like having to eat a different kind of breakfast or anything like that. And if anyone saw that they needed Carl's time, they just had to go talk to him. And Gabby said, yeah, just set an appointment to go talk to Carl. A deliberate conversation. Probst highlights that Mike is the last male Goliath. Didn't even dawn on me, but yeah, sure enough. And then we get another tribal lines blurred on that reward line from Mike. So who we got? We got Probst, we got Alison and Mike about tribal lines being blurred as we go through the episode this time. I'll give credit to all three. Now, I gotta think that Angelina did this knowing about Probst talking a few years ago about how much they enjoyed watching Friday Night Lights. And while they were on location, that was one of the things that the crew were doing. They were watching the show Friday Night Lights about a high school football team. And so she says, clear eyes and full hearts here. And she's got confidence in how things are going. It just sounded like a reference from that show to me, a quote from the show. And I think she did that on purpose for him. Allison's not so clear. She says she's got apprehension. Davie says there's a clear plan for the vote, and you got to look at it both forward and backward if you're going to make it to day 39. And Mike's talking about planning and how he's going to manage to keep up with everything that's going on, and it can be overwhelming at this point for sure. Okay, it's time to vote. The votes come in. Alison ends up with 4, and then Carl catches up, and he's definitely got a worried look on his face, and then boom, boom, 3, 4, and 5, and Carl is gone. Mike is smiling, and yeah, I thought of Brandon A. when they did this. So you get Gabby, Alison, and Kara all do the Carl bing when he gets blindsided. Nick is completely confused when Carl's voted out. He doesn't know what's up, and he seems pretty lost at the result here. And Probst makes yet another reference to the lines having definitely blurred at this point. So that just seemed like a really good double episode. It didn't seem like a taking care of business. Here's 2 people that just need to go. I found it exciting. I like the reward challenges. I like the immunity challenges and the different social dynamics that we got to see, and to see Gabby step up like this and make her move and have people follow Gabby into battle with her plan. That was really exciting. And so, yeah, I think the ascent of this season is just continuing. It didn't seem like a lull or a step back or anything like that to me. It was like, wow, that's a lot happening in 2 episodes, and I enjoyed it all. So that, yeah, just a really good time. Next time on Survivor, we get the family visit, and then Gabby drops a bombshell. She's going after Christian. She tells us she's going to take out her number 1 ally, and we see her making a pitch to Kara and Alison. And how surprising is that? I mean, it's like to have the build up through the 2 episodes and all that. And it's like, okay, yep, they got rid of Alec. And then, boom, now Carl's gone. And you got to wonder where some of these folks are with that decision. And like for Mike, it makes a lot of sense, because he basically got to draw even again, and he got to do a Goliath strong vote. You got 4 Goliath jury members. That's like 4 votes he could potentially curry from this effort, and from taking Carl out. And it makes a lot of sense for Gabby, and certainly it's a lifeline for Alison and Angelina, and Kara's more than happy to take a David out. So it's very beneficial for Gabby. You got to wonder, and it's okay for Mike too, but you got to wonder what Christian is really thinking here, or if he thought that through clearly. Because basically he's put them back in a position where they're 4 Davids and 4 Goliaths. It's like Gabby gave him an ultimatum, and I'm not sure how he arrived at that decision where it was good to draw even again. He knows he can't trust Mike. Maybe he's got a connection with Alison because they've worked and talked for a while, and she pulled the whole cry thing with him like Gabby does. I don't know why he saw now was the right time to get rid of Carl. It seems like that was a tactical error. And I think Christian's he's not tracking some of these threats as well as the other folks are. And he's essentially turned on Nick and Davie at this point, but he's going to need them. I'm not sure how I think Christian's in trouble. I'm not sure how he comes out okay on this. That's definitely a question. So, has Gabby become the godfather? Did taking out Carl make her the one in control going forward? There's more people going to follow her into this next battle to get rid of Christian. He's a threat to win. Smart play. And, get him before he gets you, Gabby, right? So that's something to think about too. but there's still lots of pieces, and you could easily lose the majority, and you don't want to be drawing even like they set themselves up to do. So I can see how it makes some sense for Gabby. I'm not sure that it makes a lot of sense for Christian, and I think Davie and Nick are hurting too. Now Christian's not necessarily going to go anywhere because he's got an idol, and now Nick's got one also. So that leaves Davie vulnerable of the three of them. But if they somehow can hide from Christian what the vote is, well, at a minimum, they could flush it. And that would leave Nick in a position. Does he play his to save Christian the way Davie did? Or does he hold his own, quietly, secretly? Because you got to think that Nick shared with Davie that he got it. I mean, he knew he was going for it. He was covering for him. So those two know. It's whether or not they shared with Christian at this point isn't clear. So, wow, I'm excited. It just keeps ramping up, and there's more and more layers to the game each week. So definitely having a lot of fun with this season and enjoying it. Certainly look forward to hearing what you thought about this one too. All right, let's do a JSFL update. Here we go. Looks like we had 8 people lost their USB for Alec, and 14 people lost their USB for Carl. We've got 8 people tied for first this week now. It's got Brandon from Alabama, Earl G, Griffin, Jules, Lovegood 8, Nina, Sophia, and Susan R are all tied for first with 44 total points. There were 107 people who earned a vote-off point for Alec and 36 who earned a vote-off point for Carl. That one was certainly a little harder to see. There were 89 people who lost safe points for Alec and 122 that lost safe points for Carl. I had Carl safe. I did have Alec going, but also had Kara going. So only end up with 4 total points out of a possible 6 for me. Okay, and on the side challenge, we've got Jay Kindred is in first with 43 points, just one off the leaders, the 8 leaders that are up there at the top of JSFL. Drew is in second with 42 points. James and Shannon, Jeremiah and myself are at 39 points. Parker and Cold Mike are at 38 points. Rodney at 37, and by himself in the basement, we got Brandon A with 36. There we go. Exciting double episode. Well, exciting for me. Yet to be determined what you thought about this episode. That's the broad strokes, the big overview, some analysis, and a little bit of prediction on my behalf. I think things are turning sour for Christian there. But I'm really curious to hear what you thought about our double episode this week. The voicemail line 206-350-1547. Toll free 844-643-8737, or you can record your own and send it as an attachment to Joanne and Stacy Show at gmail.com. If you're not quite comfortable having your voice on the show yet, you can always write it up and send it in an email, and I will read it in on your behalf. That feedback's due Saturday Pacific, noon Pacific time, looking whether you write it up or record it or call in. In terms of the content, it doesn't have to be total time at 3 minutes, but we're looking for about 3 minutes from each person. We've been having just amazing, fantastic listener feedback shows all season long. It's a testament to how good this season is, too. But folks have been sharing things from their own personal perspectives and lots of different viewpoints and an awesome spectrum of analysis that comes in every week for the listener feedback show, and I'm really stoked and looking forward to putting that show together on Saturday. The sooner you get it in, the sooner I can get it prepped and ready to go too, so you don't have to wait until Saturday at noon. Some people prefer to do that, but if you can get it in a little early, it'll make it easier on me to get it all together. So I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait to see what you thought about this double episode and what you think we can expect next from where we are. 4-4 even again. Where's it going to go from here? Have a good one.